Hello everybody, it's Ron the Meathead Gardener. Today I want to talk about something that might be old hat for some of you, but I want to talk about compost tea and composting. Two things that I think are absolutely essential to good gardening, especially organic gardening. And the way I do the compost tea is the Meathead way, which is I keep it simple. It's very easy to do, and there's no cost at all to it virtually. So let's get started. Well, the heat wave finally broke. It's going to be in the low 80s. It's about 10 to 15 degrees cooler than it has been since probably Memorial Day down here in Jacksonville. So bear with me. I've been here outside for 10 minutes. I'm already soaking wet. Most successful gardeners are composting. It's nothing new. But really the way we do it here in the household, Mrs. Meathead Gardener and myself, we start in the kitchen. We collect all of our food scraps, minus the meat, but vegetable scraps and eggshells and things like that, all go into a little container, goes underneath the sink, and when it fills up, we take this out and it either goes into my main compost pile, or in this case, it goes into a recycled garbage can that I use for a worm garden, and I'll show you what that looks like. Over here, I got a little shady spot on the side of the house, and I've got two recycled garbage cans. I drilled holes in them, and this is where I transfer all of the kitchen waste. Goes right in there. I give it a little stir with the fork. It is just loaded with earthworms. And you know, it doesn't take long for those worms to digest and compost all of the material we put in here. And there's a lot of different things you can put in. You can put in all your garden waste, your weeds, put in shredded paper and stuff from your office. All of that stuff decomposes real well and the worms love it. In the second container is where I more or less keep the finished compost, and what it is, it's just rich with worm castings. That's the worm poop, and you can just see this is really rich stuff. I don't know if there's anything better that you can put on your plants than just 100% worm castings, and this works great for the compost tea. I'll show you. I take about maybe a quart or so of the worm castings, and I just give them a little sift. Make sure I don't put any live worms in there, because I like those worms, so I toss them right back in the worm farm. Just get this sifted. Just takes a minute. Next step, take my 5-gallon bucket, and I'm going to fill it with rainwater out of my rain cistern. But you can see it. It's to think that all of this used to be garden scraps and weeds, and now, thanks to the earthworms, or more specifically red wigglers, they've turned all of this stuff into just the most fantastic soil amendment that you can believe. The main ingredient in there, all those worm castings. Just pour those right in there. Now, that's good just the way it is. In a few days that'll turn into tea. But you can start this and make it a little faster by adding a little air. I just go ahead and got a regular aquarium pump. Okay, I've got my worm compost, my rainwater, and my aquarium aerator with my stones, producing a lot of oxygen. Next step is I like to add a little fuel, and you can use any kind of a simple sugar. You can use molasses, you can use corn syrup, you can use regular white cane sugar, and you don't need much. Just for a 5-gallon bucket, maybe a couple of tablespoons. And it's a little bit like making bread, where you use the sugar to feed the yeast, and that the yeast uses the sugar as fuel, and they start to multiply like crazy. Well, that's what's happening in this compost tea. By making compost tea is I'm a microorganism rancher. I'm releasing them all from their solid state, and I'm going to turn them into a tea that can be easily applied to any kind of a plant. Now, for those of you who just simply can't make compost or create a worm farm, there's, you could buy mushroom compost or manure, and it works the same. I mean, there's no doubt that the worm compost is the best, but those other composts will also work. See, what you're doing in principle is you're taking literally a quart of compost and diluting it in 5 gallons of water, and you're increasing the effectiveness of that quart of compost by giving it some food, giving it some air, and then giving it some nice rainwater. Now, by the way, if you don't use rainwater, you can use regular tap water, but the chlorine and the chemicals that are in our drinking water, they'll kill a lot of those beneficial microorganisms that are in this tea. So you could bubble that out with your air, or you could just let the tap water sit out for a couple of days, and eventually that chlorine and the fluoride and everything will just kind of dissipate. But in about 2 days, this concoction will have a nice frothy head on it, and it'll smell just like the earth after you get a nice rain, and you know it's ready. And then I simply, from that stage, you can even dilute it 2 or 3 to 1, and it still works great. But I put it on, full strength, and you could treat all of your house plants, all of your plants, your container plants, even your in the ground plants. Give them a nice dose of the compost tea, and what that'll do is that tea, full of microorganisms, will get down in there and it'll work that soil. Those microorganisms will go to town and they'll eat all the soil and all the junk that's around the roots of those plants. And what makes it so beneficial to the plant is that when those microorganisms, they're by the billions, and when they start pooping, the poop is what the root system on the plants can take up as nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, but mainly nitrogen. And it's the most fantastic organic fertilizer that you can put on, and you cannot overdo it. So that's just my little, it's not a secret, everybody's been doing it for years and years. It's just that the Meathead way is very simple, and the result, my size, making a 5-gallon batch of compost tea at a time, it's okay, but I could use a lot more, so I typically will make, this is a 35-gallon Rubbermaid garbage can, and I've got a nice spot here where this fills up in no time at all during a thunderstorm. Well, the first thing you need, if you're going to make compost tea, is you need water, preferably rainwater. There's nothing better than this stuff right here, and this costs virtually nothing. It just costs really a little bit of electricity and a couple of tablespoons of simple sugar. That's it. Well, you know, I like to keep it simple with my tea. Just the worm castings or compost, water, and a little bit of simple sugar. You can get a little bit more elaborate, and I've run tests, you know, adding things like fish fertilizer, which is protein for the bacteria in the tea. I've added pure kelp, and I've added things like alfalfa pellets. These two, the kelp and the alfalfa pellets, both have a natural plant growth stimulant in them. And I've run side-by-side tests on plants, just regular tea and then tea with different additives in there. I don't see any difference, to be honest with you. So I stick with what's simple and what's really inexpensive. It's been a couple of days, and this compost tea really, it just has such a smell to it. It's got a nice frothy head on it. If you let it go more than 2 or 3 days, sometimes the bacteria in the tea will work on itself and it'll turn anaerobic. And that's pretty telltale when that happens, because it smells like a sewer. Now you could put this into a pump sprayer and spray around and get the, you know, do the foliage. What I like to do is get a funnel and put a paint screen in there. You can get these at your box store for $1. And I just get recycled container here. And it's as easy as that to fill this up. Give these a little shot. Even though they're in fruiting and flowering stage, we've had a lot of rain lately, and just want to build the soil back up just a little bit. This is great for giving the seeds a little boost. I just planted some cukes and squash and beans and things, and they're going to love this.